Okay, this is the terrain generation tool tutorial. To start with, we have controls. You have right click to rotate around the center point. Control left click to move the rotation point around. You have the scroll wheel to zoom. Middle mouse button to change the rotation point to wherever you middle mouse click. And if you'd like to change the sensitivity for the control click or the zoom, you can change it on the right here. And you have the reset camera rotation position. This lets you reset it to the center of the model. Okay, starting with terrain generation with the diamond square algorithm. This the detail, it determines the resolution of the terrain. Larger is bigger, and then you go smaller and smaller. You can see the difference. Roughness determines how jagged it is. So 1 is very jagged, you can see. Or 2, or bottom, which is very flat. In the middle, normal. Yeah? Noise. Size determines the resolution as well. You will see that while you generate, it may look slightly different to when you release it. That is because it's then generating, it's now fully rendering the model, because as you slide, it renders at a lower resolution than when you let go. Redistribution takes it to either the top or the bottom, you can see. Height scales the noise values between 0 and height. And floor height brings up the floor, you can see here. So lower the height slightly and redistribute, that's good, okay. So noise, you have noise specific options, you have Perlin noise, simplex noise, cellular noise. Those are all different types of noise. Let me turn this back to 1. There you go. So you can see what that noise looks like here. Perlin noise will look like this. Simplex this. And cellular this. You can combine multiple noises at once. And you can see this height map image is just an image representation of the terrain. You can add detail to the terrain by activating the specific noise and increasing the octaves. What that does is it layers multiple different scales of the noise on top of each other to create a more detailed look. We'll then redistribute it up to make a more mountainous looking terrain. And then what we'll do is you'll see the intensity. This only works when you have multiple terrains selected. It determines the strength of a specific noise's height value. A 1 means it is, if both are 1, they are valued equally, so it's the average. If 1 is lower, it will use the other noise's height value more prominently than the one of the lower value. As you can see, it will change to look more like a cellular noise, and then it'll go up and you can't see it. And you'll see the changes that make when you change the intensity here. scale changes the scale of the terrain. Higher it is, the more compact the noise is. You can see here. So usually you want to stick pretty low. You can directly change the values, ignoring the sliders, by control clicking. You can then manually set the values. Next, you move on to hydraulic erosion. Cycles determines how many rain droplets generate. You have advanced controls here you shouldn't need to touch. And then you have hydraulic erosion, which activates erosion. You can access this by pressing the shortcut E. It will now do it. Sometimes it may take a while. There you go. It's now eroded the terrain. You can see it is rather jagged, so you may want to smooth the terrain over. Pressing S smooths the entire terrain. So you'd press S a couple times. You can see the terrain slowly smoothing out. You can see the terrain represented here in the height map image as well. Next, you move on to the brushes. We have brush 1. Let me make that smaller. This flattens the terrain. You can see its values. You have the size, which changes the size it affects. The max height difference, which affects the difference in height of each vertex that it will flatten. So if you see we go up to this mountain here, it won't flatten that. If we increase the max height difference, we'll be able to flatten it. Smoothness determines how harsh it is flattening. So the lower you go, the more it just smooths out instead of flatten. And if you make it 1, it completely levels the area without a consideration of any of the other values. Next, you have the raise brush. Self-explanatory, it raises the terrain. The raise rate determines how fast the terrain raises. You see here. And the raise strength determines how much it leans to the center point or the larger radius. A lower strength adds equally or more equally to all of the vertexes in the range or radius, and a higher one leans towards the center. The lower brush does the exact same thing but lowers, so you can see it's reducing the space here. Lower the strength, increase the size. You can see it detracts from quite a bit. The smooth brush smooths the terrain. You can see it smooths it out. You can increase the size it smooths. And the smooth rate, the lower it is, the more it maintains the vertex's original value. So it maintains more detail. The higher it is, the more evenly it averages the height, which means you lose a lot more detail, but it becomes more smooth. You can see. You can revert these changes with Control Z and Control Shift Z to redo them. This gives you more control. You can revert all the way back. There you go. Before we've done anything. You then have the color. All of these can be accessed with the key shortcuts 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, along with E and S for the hydraulic and smooth terrain. The color brush lets you color the terrain based on the color you pick. as you can see. You can pick a color with the color picker, which is P. So we're on yellow now. You can pick the blue and it'll let you paint in it. You will have to enable the color brush again. There we go. You can do that with 5. You can also set the whole map to a specific color. Change that to a dark green. Set whole map color button. And then you can paint on it once more. As you can see. You can undo the color changes as well and redo them. Next you go on to the exporting and importing. You can export the height map as an image. So you change this to the test and then do tutorial. You type the name in here, click enter. This will give you the ability to load the height map in. There we go. You might see that the height is a bit off from what you had on it. You can adjust this with the height value to adjust it back to how it was. If you remember the height from when you were using it, you can manually enter that in. If you want to then start generating terrain normally, you will click the loaded model here, which will then enable you to manually alter the terrain again. You can also export the terrain, so we'll quickly make one. There we go. So we have a terrain. You can also add some, raise it a bit, raise rate. There you go. Add some raise. You can then export this terrain as a GBL file, so that we can name this tutorial again. You can then load this GLB file in, tutorial, and you'll see it loads straight in. We can now change it after we change the loaded model. We will then load GLB file, so it will look different. You can see it is now set back to how it was. You can also manipulate this height value if you would like, though it is often not necessary. So you can turn the load model back off so you can access the noise again. The final thing is you have the wireframe, which lets you see the topology of the terrain, as you can see. This will show you that obviously you should not be using such large terrains or sizes that often. You should stick predominantly to mid-sized terrains. You also have in the top left corner the information controls. It will show you what everything can do. And there's a showcase terrain values for a preset as well.